WesWes Show.
All right, boys, we'll get straight into it. A lot to cover this week with both the All Blacks and the Black Ferns reeling from losses over the weekend. But I'll start with a bit of the local footy and look at the NPC Finals. So both games are on Saturday. We've got Taranaki hosting Otago in the Championship Final and Waikato hosting Tasman in the Premiership Final. So I wanted to get some thoughts on the NPC as a whole, as well as some thoughts on the finals themselves. So, Rog, mate, seeing you're on, I'll give you, I'll let you have the first word, mate. What are your thoughts on the finals and just the NPC as a whole so far?
I think some of the games that I've been lucky enough to be able to watch, been some exciting rugby, and obviously a lot of the provincial sort of rivalries that are out there have had a lot of good support week in, week out. Unfortunately, all the Auckland provincial sides, referring to North Harbour, Auckland and Counties Manukau, who have been pretty much eliminated from the competition. Their competition was pretty much over right at the get-go. But the competition itself has been able to continue, and seeing some people put their hands up, obviously, for Super Honours next year. And it's been interesting to watch those for the first time have put their hands up for Moana Pacifica or been included in that Super franchise. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those Pacifica talent go for the first time in the next tier up. And but I think it's been some good. Like Hawke's Bay were very unlucky to miss out on, coming from championship winners last year to, going up to the next level. They get knocked out in the semis, so they've done pretty good. And there's a fair few guys in there, like Lolangi Visinia, who'll be kitting out for Moana Pacifica. And, the last time he was in Super Colours, I think it was the Blues, or maybe more recent times the Hurricanes. So upon his return from overseas, but it should be interesting to see how they go in a sort of a new sort of team made from a lot of players especially in the NPC. But Scott Barrett can be sort of strengthening the stocks at lock for Taranaki this week in the final. So they were lucky to get over.
Good pickup. Yeah, okay.
Southland were very unfortunate to miss out there last week. So yeah, it should be interesting results. And then you got the Waikato, who will be facing Tasman in the. I believe is that the Premiership? I believe it's the Premiership.
Yep. That's the Premiership final.
Yep. Yeah. So. And Tasman, obviously, no easy beats. They've been able to push through, and I think they're defending champs. So, yeah, they've done really well.
Yep. Good thoughts there. Looks like Joey's having a couple of technical difficulties, but I mentioned at the start, Rog, you're a Counties Manukau guy. I'm an Auckland guy. So with both our teams not part of it, did you jump on another team or just watching it as a neutral? Is anyone you really supported throughout?
Yeah, it was just I guess Manawatu was a team that I sort of did end up following a little bit with, the inclusion of Aaron Smith having stayed home from the Northern Hemisphere tour. So he's, boosted their ranks in terms of their campaign. However, they've fallen short this year, 2021, but then guys like Eddie Fidel and Ray Nuia who were plying their trade down there, so it was just sort of like see how those boys were doing well, and they seem to be gelling pretty good, but just fell short towards the end there. And also Thames Valley, and in the Heartland competition, sort of a team that I once sort of had to travel down to be a part of many moons ago, and so yeah. It was good to see them make the final for the Colin Mead or the Meads Cup, but just fell short to a very powerful South Canterbury who based himself out of Timaru. So no, that was an interesting game, but South Canterbury were they led all the way and undefeated all year. Thames Valley dropped one game the week before against Wanganui, so they had a pretty good sort of win loss ratio as well. So it was the top two teams in the Heartland or in the Mead Cup final, and they did really well to take that one out. But yeah, good to see Thames Valley Swamp Foxes have a lot of support down in South Canterbury on the weekend.
Yep, good thoughts there. Good to cover the Heartland Championship. Doesn't get a lot of cover on the counter ruck, but we should probably touch on it a bit more. So I'm glad that you're covering the grassroots of the game there, Rog. And I know you've always had your ear on the ground. A lot of your former teams seem to pop up well on your podcast. So I know you've been around. So no, that's good to get that out the way. I wanted to use one of your words, Rog. Is this sort of I don't know. I will say this with Auckland being out, I jumped on Hawke's Bay just because they've got so many guys who are going to be playing for Moana Pacifica, and just because Moana Pacifica are representing the Polynesian teams, we both got that Polynesian descent. So I jumped on Hawke's Bay, and yeah, I was really impressed with them. I gutted they didn't play the final, but I wanted to come back to you, Raj. You've used the word sort of makeshift competition a lot when describing the Blues' success, makeshift competition, and all the rest of it for our Super 12, Super Rugby stuff. Our regular listeners will know this. Would you say this is a makeshift title without Auckland and North Harbour counties? Would you put that in the makeshift sort of category?
No, well, I guess circumstances have sort of dictated here, and a lot of it's out of our control as we've experienced over the last couple of years now, almost 2 years since we were hit with the first lockdown, and it was just out of our control. And obviously, it was just where the clusters were happening was in Auckland, especially in this most recent lockdown, and just happened to fall on, especially when we had such a great year coming from the America's Cup, leading into having a summer where we were the envy of the world, and all of a sudden it's almost taken a total flip, and we are now the laughing stock, maybe,
Yep.
in relation to the world has sort of carried on. They've had their stand down periods when they were watching. All eyes were on Auckland, and so I guess it's just the nature of COVID and how unpredictable it is. We've got the Delta variant now, which has caused even more mayhem in terms of the the freedoms that we have or the lack thereof. So it is what it is, and unfortunately, counties Auckland and North Harbour, as mentioned, seasons were cut short right from the get go, and a lot of players have, probably wished that they could um, get some sort of game time, but they've had to call time on their seasons already. And I guess that's what club rugby experienced earlier on as well, last year as well as this year. Where competitions were cut short, so it's a very unpredictable landscape at the moment, and who knows what will present itself next year. So hopefully we've got it all right, and we've put everything in place um, to prevent anything of similar nature next year, especially with the new sort of Super Pacifica or Super Pacific rugby competition. So, but and that's just sport, but life gets put on hold. The normalities, as we know, have changed a fair amount.
Yep. Good thoughts. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I'll just get your thoughts on some standout players. I know this isn't something we discussed. We're going to talk about, so I'll give you a bit of time to think about it. But did anyone stand out in the ITM Cup or the Mitre 10 Cup? I'm not sure what it's called now. NPC. I'll give you a couple just while you can give you some time to think about it, because I did sort of just dump this on you now. But that young first five McClutchy from Hawke's Bay. So not a guy that I knew a lot about. I know Saleh, who's a regular on the podcast. He thought he was quite a good player, and I'm glad that Moana Pacifica picked him up because I think he could be something special. I was impressed with his goal kicking. He kicked a over halfway penalty. So I think this kid could be something special and a really good pickup for Moana Pacifica. And you talked about Manawa too as well, and he's got a young number 8 there, Braden Yose, who I think he could be good. He's still a young man. He's come through the systems. He played New Zealand schools, under 20s, and all the rest of it. And he looks like he's going to kick on, hopefully, and be something special. So he's part of the Hurricanes, and hopefully he can kick on. But any players stand out to you this year?
Yeah, I think the Danny Twala from the Hawke's Bay. Talking about the Hawke's Bay, Danny Twala. I watched him on the weekend and over the past couple of matches, and he's quite a very aggressive um, player that can play inside centre, outside centre. But I think he's good enough to play on the wing as well. But yeah, he could be someone that Moana Pacifica obviously going to be very good to have snapped up and seeing how he fares in the super competition. But yeah, Danny Twala sort of was very impressive watching on this year's Super Rugby. I mean, sorry, NPC. But then, like you mentioned, McCutchie. And some of the commentators already mentioned as well that how um, unlucky he has had to be not snapped up already by any of the other Super Rugby Super Rugby teams. So
But yeah, I'll just carry on. I just want to say good luck to all the finalists this week. So we'll probably get some predictions. We've got our TAB account, which our regular listeners will know about. So we'll just carry on, and we can bring up those predictions again when we do our multi bet. But yeah, I just wanted to say that good luck to all the finalists this week for your makeshift title. I'm going to call it a makeshift title because Auckland's not there, and that's my team. And if you win without Auckland, without beating Auckland, I don't count that as a real win. So yeah, good luck to the two finalists, the four finalists in the NPCs. Yeah, so I wanted to look at the international game now. We talked a lot about the NPC, but the international game now, I suppose from a New Zealand perspective, the thing that really shocked me is the Black Ferns, they've lost three in a row, and they're the World Cup champions on the women's side, and the All Blacks, they just lost to Ireland 20 to 29, I think the final score was. So that means that Ireland have won three of the last five against the All Blacks, which is quite interesting. So I was just looking through some of the history of the game, and the All Blacks, they won the first test against Ireland in 1905, and they then went on to win every test against Ireland until they first lost in 2016. So that was 26 tests in a row that the All Blacks were able to just basically wipe the floor with Ireland. And since then, Ireland have gone on to win three of the last five. So this has quickly turned from being a pretty much a one-sided bloodbath to the All Blacks just beating Ireland all the time to being one of the best sort of modern rivalries in Test rugby. And I'm not sure if the Ireland look like they've figured the All Blacks out. So I was hoping the boys could give a bit of perspective on that, but I feel like that rush defence, which has troubled the All Blacks for how long? Since Graham Henry, Steve Hansen era, and the Ireland have perfected it quite well. So it looks like they've fallen victim to it again. And I'm standing there watching the game thinking, how can you not have developed a game plan to beat this? We know what they bring. They bring the same thing for the past sort of 5-6 years, and we still haven't got a game plan to complement it to beat it. So I suppose I look at all the coaches. It's Foster, he's carrying on from what Hansen did, and it's just the same ideas who carried on from what Henry did. It's just the same ideas over and over again. Just there's no new blood, there's no new formula. It's just carrying on what they've always done, and I'm not sure that it's the way forward. So I'm hoping the boys can jump on soon to provide some other perspective. But yeah, I'm not convinced that on Foster. I think the All Blacks they got outplayed, and this carries on from the game against Italy, where even though they won, it was one of the worst performances from an All Blacks team I've seen, especially that first 20 minutes. Our group chat was just full of people just saying how poor the All Blacks have played. So, I think they've got bigger issues, and I think that Ireland in particular are a team who've got a game plan that can beat the All Blacks. So I'm not sure. I'm not convinced on Foster. I think he should go. I don't think New Zealand rugby has the balls to drop him. So I think he's just going to carry on. They will just stick with the status quo. He's got legit excuses because COVID has sort of wreaked havoc over the whole international season. So he hasn't had enough chances. Well, he can say he hasn't had enough chances to bet in his game. But if you look at his record, he coached the Chiefs before, and they were Gaia. They under his watch, they didn't win anything. They were bottom of the table, and it wasn't until Dave Rennie came on that they changed. So the Chiefs turned it around, after he left, and I think he coached Southland. We might have to fact check this, but this was something I remember. To 17 straight losses. So his coaching record is poor. So they talk about this whole succession plan with the All Blacks, right? So the All Blacks had Graham Henry, and he was a great coach before, and they were doing great things. And then they went on to Steve Hansen, who was another great coach. He done great things with Wales. He was part of Canterbury, part of the setup of the Crusaders, and he already done great things as well. So you're passing it on. The succession planning is passing on from one great coach to another great coach. Now we're passing it on to Foster, and we think that the succession plan is the reason that it works. But the succession plan only works if you pass it on to another great coach. And I don't think Foster's a great coach, so he will not win us the World Cup. I'm going to put this out there. What are we? 2 years before the World Cup comes out. From what I've seen, he's not the right coach. So I'm going in pretty hard on him, and I'm just having a little rant until our guys come back. But I don't think he's the right coach for the All Blacks. I would love to see Scott Robertson given a chance. He probably won't get it.
Yeah, I guess everyone and you have always been on that wagon of, going on about Foster's losing record as a coach.
Yep.
I don't know, can't recall too much, and I haven't gone into the depths of his provincial coaching career. But
17 losses in a row, I believe. We will have to fact check that. I'm pretty sure that's what he lost for Southland. He coached Southland.
For Southland, yeah.
It's something horrendous. It's like,
and then leading into his appointment as Chiefs coach, what was something like 10 years that he was
10
close to?
wooden spoon years. Nah, not wooden spoon years, but yeah, carry on.
Yeah, and it wasn't until Dave Rennie sort of come in that you started to see massive improvements and obviously the 2 titles that came with it as well in that era of Dave Rennie and his tenure as head coach. So, and by that time, Foster was a part of the All Blacks setup. So, and it just seems like I'm not sure if you've already mentioned it or that obviously that was the segue into what his head role now, being part of those few campaigns under Henry, then Hansen, and now he's the top dog. So yeah, it's obviously a lot of it is pending on this result on this weekend. If they lose, then it's the worst sort of season for the All Blacks since 2008 or 9. So
yeah, I think 2008. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot is riding on it. The French are not going to be any easy beats. They've got some really, heavy hitters at the moment, and we saw what happened with Ireland on the weekend. It was almost like the Irish were on a different level at halftime. Was it 137 tackles or close to 150 tackles to 37? How does that work? 37 tackles the Irish made in the first half. It just goes to show how starved the All Blacks were of the ball, because they were having to defend, and they did so valiantly. However, it just seemed like they could. It was almost like watching NRL team, how they had so many backdoor options, and it didn't matter. They had front ball runners, but then they had guys as a backdoor option, and the All Blacks just couldn't seem to get ahead of that. And it reminded me of the 2019 semi-final versus England, where they couldn't get on the front foot and they were just playing catch-up, but even worse against the Irish. And, they always talk about Wales being a foe of the All Blacks. However, they've only won 3 times, and the last time was, like we've mentioned in previous podcasts, 1953. And now the Irish are on equal standing as the Welsh, with 3 wins out of the last 5 tests. And it took them so long in 2018, I think it was, to get their first win. And so, in almost 100 years. So it's the Irish are on a bit of a good lead into the next World Cup. So who knows what can happen from now through to the next World Cup? Will Foster survive it? Obviously, a lot is riding on this World Cup on this weekend against the French, but with Dupont there leading their charge, they're going to make sure that the All Blacks have got some serious battle on their hands. So yeah, Foster's head, is it on the chopping block? They've signed him through to the World Cup and beyond, I believe. So a review at the end of this season, will it make any difference? Will these results make any difference, or will they have to uphold the agreement of those contracts, or was there a clause in terms of KPIs or results that needed to push them through to the following season? But I know there's many people that have wanted Foster gone, and I totally understand that given the results. But I guess they saw something in him, and it wasn't like he was in good company coming through to become the head coach. So he was hoping that they've put the trust and faith in the right person, or is that person doing backspins down in Crusader Lane?
I think he is. I think he's doing backspins in Crusader Lane. I think it's not so much Foster. I think they fell in love with the idea of the succession plan because it works so well from Henry to Hansen and then on to Foster. They like the succession planning. They think that that's the way forward. But the succession plan, which I brought up before, only works if the coach is good. So when they passed it on to Hansen, he'd done good things with Wales before. He was part of Canterbury and the Crusaders coaching systems. So he's come through. He was a winning coach long before. Now you're passing it on to Foster, was Paul with the Chiefs. I know that's your team, Rog, but it was Dave Rennie. You're right. It was Dave Rennie who turned the Chiefs around after Foster left. He was poor provincially. I don't know if he had any international experience. So they're backing the succession planning more than the coaching ability, it seems like. And that's where I think they've got it wrong. So I've never been sold on Foster. I think part of the problem with Foster is he's coaching at the same time that Scott Robertson is just killing it. He's killing it for the Crusaders. And there is a legitimate guy in the wings who everyone thinks is a gun coach. So that's sort of a bit different. If there was no one that you thought could do the job who was around, because Dave Rennie's gone, it's just because Scott Robertson's there and he's available and he's sort of made no secret about the fact he wants to be an All Black coach. That's where it gets a bit murky. But I'm not convinced, given his coaching record and given what I've seen, that he will win the World Cup. And when we talk about the succession plan, the same faults that Hansen had, he struggled with the rush against the rush defence, and it's those same ideas. Foster's struggling again, so it's the succession plan of the ideas that didn't work before under Hansen aren't working again. So yeah, a lot to cover there, but we'll talk about the All Blacks a bit more, mate. Do you see any changes going forward? Because there's a lot of guys who I think have been exposed, but that maybe they're not quite up to All Black level. Are there any guys in the squad or anyone you think might come into the squad for next year and the build up to the World Cup and all that sort of carry on? Because I think a couple of guys might have played their way out of it.
Yeah, well, you look at they've still got next year, and that's where Super Rugby is going to be integral. How much rest do the All Blacks get at the beginning of the year or any part of the year? But you could see the likes of Brody Retallick, Sam Whitelock probably being eased into next year. But then you've got the likes of, from what I saw of Sevu Reece on the weekend, a lot of questions were asked and a lot of them weren't answered in terms of his defence role. Even his attack is just a little bit one-dimensional. We know that Sevu Reece can create a lot out of nothing, something out of nothing, similar to a lot of the past Fijian wingers. However, it just seemed like not only Sevu, but a whole lot of that backline were just left wanting. There were glimpses from Rico Ioane, from Will Jordan, showing the flashes of the brilliance that they have. And Rico, with Will Jordan creating that try that kept him in the game, and then unlucky to get that forward pass off to his brother Akira that would have, given us a good chance towards the dying minutes of that test. However, it just wasn't consistent enough right across the board. And so Cody Taylor in that try close under the post to the reserve hooker that came on, that was. Oh no, it wasn't. No, not the reserve hooker. So I do apologise. And one of the Lucy's who scored, who ran good 30 metres in the clear, and it was just off the ruck. He stepped inside Cody Taylor. There was no one else from the ruck between the ruck and Cody, and he was home and hosed. I think he surprised himself that he was able to get through with such ease, and I guess that was the general feel of that game, is that Ireland were just on a roll, and the All Blacks were on a bit of a hiding, albeit All Black standard, not hiding to nothing. And I think for the first time, you almost felt sorry for the All Blacks and that's how a lot of loyal supporters, have felt with the Tongas, with the Samoas, when they come up against a massive Tier 1 team like the All Blacks, and they're on a hiding to nothing. It was almost the same sentiment. It doesn't matter what the All Blacks would do, they couldn't peel back this game, regardless. And it was just everything was going against them. But the Irish were the ones creating the opportunity. They were the ones preventing with stellar and such staunch defence against the All Blacks. Bundyaki was massive as a part of it. He was a massive draw card in terms of the defence. Numbers were on him, and then created a little bit of an overlap or an extra gap out wide for them to be able to score. But I think they were just on edge and just ready for that. And just right from the get-go, the haka was drowned out. The All Black staunch attack was nowhere to be found. And even Sam Whitelock just looked helpless at times. So Adi Savea trying his heart out. But Seviorich was just a really massive standout for me. Controversial call about him being held. I believed his knees were touching the ground before the Irish scored late in that match. However, the referee didn't call it. They were able to steal the ball, and the Irish did what the Irish did. So just little things like that. Sivu's a smaller build of a very strong player, very fast and elusive. However, I guess when you got massive forwards holding you up like that, he's going to struggle to try and get the ball to the ground. And I think he was found out in that regard.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I think next year there's going to be some changes and some guys might not survive. I can't remember the last All Black coach that got sacked. I should have maybe Googled it before I came. I know guys like John Mitchell and that they didn't get their contract renewed when it was over, but I can't think of the last All Black coach who got sacked. So I don't know if New Zealand rugby will go that path just for that reason, even though I think they should. Good thoughts there, Rog. I think something's got to change. And this game against France has turned into a real crucial test. Like, he doesn't want to have the worst record, Foster. He's already got enough detractors as it is, and that's just going to fuel the fire a bit more. So All Blacks are going to be on edge, and they're going to play.
But then, how much does it fall back on the players, though? Because obviously the coach is going to take responsibility. He's going to take the glory, and when the results go his way, so he's got to front the naysayers as to why he should be still the person to take us forward into the next World Cup. However, how much responsibility falls on the players? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones on the field. Yes, they're the ones being selected by the management. However, they've been entrusted with that jersey, let alone to get the results as well. So, yeah, interesting times.
Yep. And we will say, I know we've been talking a lot about the All Blacks. We have to give Ireland a lot of credit. So I talked on this a little bit before, but we'll say it again, and you've touched on the same thing. So the All Blacks beat Ireland in the very first test that they played against each other in 1905, and then they won every test after that until Ireland beat them in 2016. So that was 26 tests in a row. And since then, Ireland have won 3 of those last 5. So it's it's must-watch TV. It's one of the best rivalries going around at the moment in Test match rugby, All Blacks and Ireland. So, and Ireland deserve a lot of credit, but their game plan of the rush defence really troubles the All Blacks, and it's been a weakness for the All Blacks for quite a while. It's been a good sort of 6-7 years they haven't figured it out. So, and I don't think Foster's going to figure it out. But we'll move forward. Move forward. I wanted to talk about. Hopefully, it's not all doom and gloom. But the Black Ferns, another New Zealand team, they've lost 3 in a row. So I
Yep.
know we want to discuss the women's game a bit more, so we'll give it a bit of airtime now, and it's something that we should discuss a bit more moving forward. So, but yeah, Black Ferns, world champions, that last World Cup, they've lost 3 in a row. So they've lost twice to England and once to France, and they've got another game against France this weekend. But any thoughts on that? What do you think's going wrong? Any ideas around the Black Ferns?
Well, I think it's it's sort of well known that the 2 year absence from international rugby due to COVID has sort of been a major factor. Also, in the Northern Hemisphere, in the French domestic competitions, as well as in the they've got domestic women's competitions going, as well as the international women's version of the Six Nations. So they've still got that international competition that they've had in the last couple of years, whereas the Black Ferns have been absent due to the COVID. They haven't been able to have any international tests, but it just seems like a massive divide and too much of a reason as to why the massive slump and these two massive hidings, 56-15 in the first test, 43-12 in the second against England, and then losing by a record margin 38-13 to France in Po last weekend. So,
Ouch.
so there's no shortage of belief, I don't think, in the and you can see that from the interviews that some of the players do. That when talking to the coaches, the media are trying to get around and support and promote the Black Fern style of rugby as much as possible, and they're getting some good attention in the Northern Tour that they're currently on. However, the results are not speaking. But I think with these heavy losses that they've suffered, it's gonna put them in good stead in the future. Obviously, it's really tough to take right now, but I guess moving forward and hopefully in time for next year, next year's Rugby World Cup, or the delayed version because it was supposed to be this year, but in New Zealand for the Women's World Cup, is one season of the newly launched Super Rugby for the women going to be enough for them to get back? They believe it will be, and then obviously with a few international tests scattered in between that before, who knows? But they've got one more test against a battle-hardened French side, but again a precursor to the All Blacks and the Le Bleu as well. So another heavy defeat, could really be asking questions, and a lot of players may play their way out. But at the same time, it's a good experience for those young players. There's a lot of young players who are donning the Black Fern jersey for the first time, and so some of this experience could be better for them in the long run come next year's World Cup in the immediate future anyway.
Yep, I agree with that. The first thing that came to my mind as well when I was trying to think of the reasons why was that what you touched on first, that 2 year hiatus, that's hurt them. Like you can play
Mm.
domestic football as much as you like, but there's a big difference in both the men's and the women's game between provincial level rugby and the top tier test level rugby. So, and it just looks like England and France that they've played in their women's Six Nations and all the rest of it. They just look a bit more battle hardened. And yeah, like you said, a lot of guys, people are playing their first. A lot of the women are playing their first ever time representing the black jersey. I saw something on the news where they've got. I think I'll have to check the numbers, but I think the French team, or it might have been the English team, they had 395 tests in their forward pack, and the Black Ferns only had 70 something. So they were a lot of newbies in there, and they've lost a lot of experienced people.
Mm.
But yeah, Joey's back. Joey was just touching on the Black Ferns, and now they've lost 3 in a row. So the World Cup's coming up next year. I know you've got a daughter. I've got 2 daughters, so I'm going to take my kids to watch the Women's World Cup next year. Try to get them inspired and hopefully turn them into future Black Ferns. But do you think the Black Ferns can turn it around before that World Cup? Because they've had 3 drubbings, and it looks like a 4th is imminent. We're doing this podcast obviously before the test being played over the weekend.
In a word, yes, I do. I do think they can turn it around. However, if we're talking about the current group, I don't know. I just don't know if they've got enough of a mix of leadership in there to go with the youth that's obviously in there. Are they rebuilding? Most likely. Are they going to be ready in time for the World Cup? That's anybody's guess. But I do think they can turn it around. I just think maybe with the right guidance in terms of coaching and that kind of thing, and the involvement of past players like Woodman, for instance, who they brought in as a bit of a saviour. She's still got the goods, I think. Still has a lot to offer the game. And I'm not sure how much they're going to use her moving forward, but I think they need to draw on the experience of those, those players that have recently moved on, and really learn how to turn it around. Because by the looks of things, those teams over there on the other side of the world, like England and France, have got our number. And if all you have to do is look at Ireland versus the All Blacks as an example. Ireland have definitely got our number. Where Ireland have innovated, I'm not sure if you guys have covered this already, but where Ireland have innovated and changed their game and evolved, we seem to have stood still. We seem to have stuck with, tried and true methods that worked 10, 15 years ago. And trying it in 2021 just won't wash. And you know how unforgiving our general public are when it comes to wins versus losses. And unfortunately for us, we seem to be losing quite a lot to the Irish team. 3 out of 5, unforgivable in a lot of people's eyes, to a team who, for a very long time, didn't beat us at all. So 3 out of 5, once they started, getting that winning feeling against us, not good. We need to turn it around, but that's not to say Ireland haven't deserved any of those wins. They totally have. They've obviously figured out a few things, and I think a large part of that has got to do with the likes of Joe Schmidt putting some processes in place that obviously have worked even after he's left. But yeah, just back on the Black Ferns, they definitely can turn it around. I'm just not sure if they can turn around within the next 3 to 5 test matches.
Yep. Good thoughts there. We did talk about the All Blacks a little bit, but yeah, you raised some good points about, we're just not evolving. We're stuck in the same thing. And I brought this up before with Rog, so I wanted to get your thoughts on it as well, where we've got the succession planning of coaches. So it was Henry was the coach, Hansen the assistant. Then, Hansen takes over, Foster's the assistant. And that sort of, that way of promoting coaches, of putting them through the system. But the problem with that is you get a lot of the same ideas being regurgitated through because they've come through the same systems. And the problems that Hansen had, the same problems that Foster had against Ireland and the rush defence. So me and Rog sort of might have disagreed a little bit, but do you think Foster should stay, or would you be getting rid of him?
When is he contracted to?
Roger's the Chiefs guy. He knows. I think till the end of the World Cup, but through to the end of the World Cup, I'm pretty sure.
The smartest that I am will say that's when he should go, at the end of his contract. But I think, as impatient as I am as an All Blacks fan and wanting to see wins all the time, naturally I'm going to say get rid of him after every loss. But you've got to give this guy more than a shot. He's coached our All Blacks teams through this COVID period, and there are a lot of logistics problems that he's had in his selections, which for me has been the biggest hamstring or Achilles heel, if you like, with regard to how the team then goes on to play together and train together and perform together. And obviously we haven't seen the results that we would have liked. However, I think we still need to give him enough of a chance to the World Cup. No, we've got 3 World Cups. Not saying we should be satisfied with the fact that we've got 3 World Cups, but I think we need to give this guy more of a shot than just after every loss call for his head. Because that's the easiest thing to do, and that's what the general public in New Zealand are expected to want. They want the coach's head after every loss, and I can see why. There's a lot of reasons why you would want Foster's head. Look at the Ireland game, for instance. You know, it just our team just didn't seem to fire for him, for us, and most of all for themselves. I'm sure they didn't go out there to lose, but at the same time, we tend to, as fans, immediately blame the coach when things go wrong. But if you look at the deeper picture, I think the first problem is recruitment. It's always recruitment. Who are you selecting in the whole squad? Is that whole squad going to bring something to the table that's going to be helpful to the collective as individuals? Are they going to add to their own game as well as the game of those around them? Are they going to leverage off the experience of those who have all those years under their belt? Are those ones that are, long in the tooth? Should they have gone already? All these questions come to mind when I'm thinking about Foster and whether he should stay or not. I think, it's unfortunate that Foster has had a supporting party, if you like, or coaching assistants who, for one reason or another, haven't been producing the results that we would have liked from each of their parts in the All Blacks squad. So we could pick apart the All Blacks all day and various parts of their game where they've fallen over, they need improvement and what have you. I just think the ethos of the All Blacks needs to improve. I think the strategy probably needs improvement, and I think it's dropped a little bit. There's some slippage since the magician that is Wayne Smith has left, because he was such a rugby brain who, just like, I'm a big fan of Razor down in the south, even though I'm not a fan of his franchise. I'm a fan of him and his coaching style. There was one example of him where he took the viewers through step by step what he thought of, what his thinking was around certain plays during a game for the Crusaders, for instance. And just the thinking behind it, you can tell this guy really studies the game and uses the rules to his advantage. And we need someone like that, or someone like Wayne Smith even, to come back, or a clone of his, or someone who thinks like him. That's not to say that they don't already have that in the All Blacks. Whoever that is in the All Blacks right now needs to step up. I guess to answer your question, should he stay or should he go? I'm kind of in two minds, but if I'm more weighing towards the give him more of a chance, let him stay.
Right, that's from a Chiefs supporter and someone who lives in Hamilton, so a bit of bias there. Yeah. I suppose it's simple for me. I think will the All Blacks win with Foster as coach? And I keep saying no. And if the answer is no, then we've got to find someone else. So I think the only reason he got the coaching role is because of the succession plan that the New Zealand Rugby Union love, not because of his coaching record, because his coaching record doesn't stack up to be the All Black coach. So he only got it because of the succession plan, and that's not a good enough reason to give him the job in the first place, and that's not a good enough reason for him to hold it given the results as well. So, yeah, interesting thoughts there. Roger, do you have anything you wanted to add on the Black Ferns and all the rest of it before we move on to our next stuff?
I think what's highlighted in the 2-year absence of international exposure for the Black Ferns. Just highlights, what a lot of Tier 2 nations like Tonga and Samoa have been going on about, the lack of exposure against Tier 1 nations. So you imagine what a Tier 1 nation like the Black Ferns getting dealt to like that due to 2 years in the wilderness or not having any international competition. That's the same bandwagon that the minnows of Tonga, Samoa and Fiji are going on about. One test every couple of years against Australia, New Zealand or even England is just not enough to close the gap, and they're always going to be on the back foot. So and it's just it's if a Tier 1 nation like New Zealand, the Black Ferns, get exposed to in this light and suffering these heavy defeats is only sort of highlights the cry of the Pacific Island nations. Not enough international exposure. Those are the results that you're going to see. And so, although it was COVID induced, it's a factor that's highlighting the England's and the French women's, at least, are still getting that international competition in the Northern Hemisphere through the women's equivalent of the Six Nations. And then even to what the defeat that the All Blacks have suffered, it highlights what, again, if the All Blacks can be found out like that by another Tier 1 nation, then the divide is still there, is great, because like we saw against South Africa earlier this year, the All Blacks just got over just snuck that one and just beat although they were being dominated again by South Africa, but they were able to get out of jail by just getting a try at the end. And the same would have been, we wouldn't be criticising the All Blacks as much, because if they had got that try for Akira Ioane, that could have been a game changer and got us, it could have been just like a Scotty, what's his name? Crusader, second five that got us out of jail. One of
Crotty.
the test matches against
Crotty,
Ireland.
Ryan Crotty.
Crotty. Yeah, so it was almost like one of those moments, but it wasn't to be. And Ireland were able to, they were the dominant team. They exercised their power and showed the All Blacks how, and they just didn't give them any breathing space whatsoever. It was a closer encounter in the second half, but by that time, I think the dominance had already been stamped, and Ireland were there to win that, and there was no way that the All Blacks would be able to turn it over. And also, in saying that, interesting about Ian Foster is that it's been quoted that during this week he doesn't seem it's unnecessary to bring an overhaul of changes through to the All Black team against the French. So it'll be interesting to see who he doesn't pick. He was a little bit more disappointed in his backs than he was with his forwards. He's quite happy and quite content with the forwards, and almost was putting the blame on the backs for not giving any good go forward ball for his forwards. So interesting take on Ian Foster's thoughts, and obviously there's probably going to be a lot more changes in the backs and in the forwards. Shannon Frizzell, has he played himself out of the All Blacks? He's hasn't really featured this campaign. He's there. Good to see him back in the squad, but there's a lot of competition riding on him now. Quinn Tupaya with Anton Leonard-Brown out. Do they bring someone like him in? Sione Havili, I'm not sure about. David Havili. Wasn't too sure about his performance on the weekend, as much as I've been a fan of his. But again, a lot of those backs were just outsmarted, outplayed. That crash ball that Geordie Barrett, he flipping dislocated Alan Wynne-Jones the week before, or a couple of weeks prior, and him barging across the line there in that short ball, I thought he would be crashing through for a try as well. But again, some stellar defence from the Irish, so able to keep the All Blacks at bay. What the French are going to produce, they've obviously said that they're not going to try and duplicate what the Irish did. What the Irish did, that's just, is it a one-off? Can it be a template for other teams? Who knows? England did it in 2019 semi-final, and not many teams, and they weren't able to replicate the same, the following week in the final. So, was that just a one-off for Ireland? But they're gunning to be. They just need one more win over the All Blacks, and they'll be more of a foe for the All Blacks than Irish ever were. Than the Welsh ever were. So, and like traditional rivals, I don't know about the Welsh and how they play that up, but yeah, 1953 is all I have to say.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, Joey, did you want to chime in on something?
Yeah, just some valid points there from Rog. And yes, I think our backline really did get outclassed, outplayed, outmuscled, all of that. And that's where I think the strategic nous of Wayne Smith could have come up with something, even at half time during that game, to turn things around. I think we are really missing his rugby brain, his tactical brain, and I think unfortunately we didn't have individuals in the backs who could, bring those audibles and adapt to what was in front of them with that rush defence that the Irish brought. And it seems like we've had years and years and years of teams who have beaten the All Blacks bringing that rush defence, like South Africa's and even one time the French. I think we just need to have something that, okay, bring your rush defence, we'll show you what we got. We don't have it. We just don't have a solution, or seem to have a solution.
Yep, good points there. The loss of Wayne Smith is something that I didn't really consider, so excellent point there. He is a rugby guru and an attacking guru in particular, so he could have helped that backline out for sure. And Roger, I love that point that you brought up about with the Black Ferns and their 2-year hiatus, sort of that how that parallels with the plight of the Polynesian teams not getting the Tier 1 games that they need. Because obviously with us being part of the WesWes Network, and we're about providing that Polynesian perspective. So we spoke ad nauseum on the Counter Ruck about the issues facing Pacific rugby and the plight of Polynesian rugby. So that parallel that you drew, I really like that. I think that fits in well with what we've been trying to talk about since we started the Counter Ruck. So yeah, good parallels there for sure. But right, boys, don't want to focus too much on that. I wanted to look forward to our next thing, which is the World Rugby Player of the Year nominees. So they've been released recently, and I'll just go through them for our listeners or anyone who's a bit unsure. So Antoine Dupont is the finalist. There's 4 finalists. He's the French halfback. Michael Hooper, the Australian open side flank. Maro Itoje, the English lock, and Samu Karevi, the Wallabies second 5. So before we get into some picks, Joey, mate, I'll come to you, mate. Anyone you thought was a bit unlucky to miss out for a nomination in your eyes?
Yes.
Some surprising ones in there, you gotta say. So there's probably a few, but yeah, who did you think should have at least got
Straight away, Evan Etzebeth.
Yes.
There's a comparison going around online between Evan Etzebeth and Maro Itoje, but obviously that speaks to the class of Itoje to be in a team that didn't do as well as the team that Evan Etzebeth has been a part of, but still made the nominee list. I guess that speaks to his individual class, but I think some others might be from more so from the South African side than any other team. I would have liked to have seen what's her name, Colby, if he was not injured as much, but Evan Etzebeth was the biggest name for me in that nominee list. It was nice to see Michael Hooper, and I think he should get it, but I don't think he will. I think they might give it to Samu Karevi.
Oh yeah, it's a bit up in the air. How about you, Roger, mate? Anyone? Oh, I will say, just carrying on from your point there, Joey Sue, about who didn't get nominated. So New Zealand won the Rugby Championship. Obviously, the All Blacks won. Wales won the Six Nations. South Africa currently ranked number 1, and none of their players were finalists for World Rugby Player of the Year, which just carries on your point about Eben and some of these other guys that probably should have got there. They were the 3 probably best teams didn't get a single nomination. So how about you, Roger? Anyone you thought should have got a nomination?
I know you just sour grapes just because Alan Wynne Jones didn't get a mention.
You took the words out my mouth, mate. Carry on. No.
As soon as you mentioned Wales won the Six Nations, you was going, oh, we know where you're leaning towards. No, it was just, I think, despite the performances by the All Blacks this year, I'm thinking Will Jordan is very unlucky to miss out. His all-out try record was it 17 tries and 12 tests. So, and he hasn't shied away from it this year just to continue that form. So every time he's been able to play, he's more within a chance of scoring a try for the All Blacks. So interesting that he's missed out. But yeah, I reckon also Elizabeth as well has been a standout and just continues his enforcer role with the South Africans. But out of the four that I've mentioned, Mario Itoje, for him to get through there, I would have put Elizabeth in before Mario Itoje, but then they could have gone with the captain as well. So a lot of people will probably see Kolisi could have been put in there too. But I guess him as the captain getting taken off during matches, maybe it's something to show whether it's just his humility that, regardless of being captain, that he can still be subbed. But at the same time, I think the dominant out of those four would be Michael Hooper, who's come back from Japanese rugby and just still massive force at international and huge sort of luxury that the Wallabies can call on, and to have him play and still probably got another World Cup or two left in him. Who knows? But yeah, I think Hooper should take that out easily, but then who knows? Depends on what the panel is looking for. But yeah, it's good that Samu Karevi's in there as well, because he's shown some good form in the midfield for the Wallabies. But I think Michael Hooper should take it out. But if it's a predominantly Northern Hemisphere panel, then I think Antoine Dupont will take that out.
Yeah, good thoughts there. It looks like we're all on the same page, because I also had Eben Etzebeth as the one, so I'm glad that you guys had already spoken about that, so I won't say too much on that. Kolisi is the second guy that I had who you touched on too, Rod, so we seem to be on the same page. And Rod, I'm glad you brought up an All Black, because I didn't have one, and Joey didn't have one that he thought, there's no really one guy that I thought stood out this year. I thought the team went quite well, but there's not one guy that I thought, shucks, this guy's playing the house down. Will Jordan's probably one that comes to mind, maybe. I thought Geordie Barrett wasn't too bad. But yeah, New Zealanders have always had at least one nomination, so it's a bit strange there. It's interesting to hear you guys pick. So you think Michael Hooper, Roger, and is that you agreeing with that, Joey? Is that correct?
I am indeed. I think he should just take it all. Even though he's out for the rest of the year, he should take that top.
Yeah. I actually like Dupont. I think he's been the best player, and I think he's going to win it. So he's had 5 tries and 5 try assists in the Six Nations. He was named in the Six Nations Team of the Year, and he was the top 14 player of the year. And I think me and Roger, we talked about this last year. I think he would have won World Player of the Year last year if he didn't, if they gave the award away. They cancelled the awards last year, and I think he would have won World Player of the Year last year. So I wonder if that's going to factor into the calculations this year. But Itoje, he's probably the odd one out. I think we all sort of agree that he shouldn't be in there. Etzebeth should be in there. But one thing I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on is, I'm sitting here with you two boys, part of the Front Rowers Club. No prop has ever even been nominated for World Player of the Year. Not even a single nomination for a single prop in the 20-odd years since we've had World Player of the Year. So have you guys got any thoughts as to why that is? I know in France, they love the props. The props are the highest paid players. in
No
France.
surprises
But
because Stace, every referee that I've seen sort of try and adjudicate the scrum, doesn't quite understand the dark arts, and for some reason you'll see a lot of props just get up totally confused as how they've been ruled against with a penalty, and we see it too many times, but they don't understand it. So there's no way a front row, let alone a prop, is ever going to be nominated because that's their bread and butter, and obviously a skinny. More often than not, a Palangi referee is going to be able to tell them how they've done their job or done it incorrectly. So it's never going to happen. I can't see anyone. Probably the only person that probably in the future is Australia's Angus
Gus Bell, yeah,
Gus Bell, yeah, that's the one. So he's probably young enough to probably come close. We've had many All Blacks who have played over 100 tests and many international players that have played over 100 as well and still never come close. So it's obviously going to be the ones who are more fancy, more light on their feet and scoring tries that will probably be in the mix. Otherwise, you just have to be tall, dark and handsome and have dreadlocks like Itoje.
yeah. Obviously, first five is the most nominated position, which are the glamour boys. But Joey, mate, obviously part of the front rowers club as well. I'll give you a say. Why do you think props have been nominated in the 20 odd years? And is there a prop that comes to mind historically that you think should have at least got a nomination? If you guys can think of one. Because I thought of it, I was shocked firstly, and I thought there was a couple of guys, but I'll give you a say there, Joey.
Oh, there's been many props who, over the years, I would have thought would get a nomination. However, I feel like the criteria for nominations aren't geared towards the prop forward. The props are the unsung heroes. Whether you choose to believe that or not, that's up to you. It's something I truly believe. I'm a bit biased because I played there, and so did Asaf Moore's older brother here. The prop forwarders, they're usually quite smart in terms of decision making. In terms of, all you have to do is watch them for 10 minutes, and you'll see the smartness come around. They know exactly how to cut corners. They know how to do the fat man's track. They know how to conserve their energy for the right time, and the right time is usually the rucks and mauls and scrums. And they know how to exert all that energy into those things, those set pieces, as well as the rolling mauls and rucks. So, and tackles and obviously ball carries. If I was to pick a prop that stands out for me in terms of nominees over the years, a lot of names come to mind. I would have thought someone like maybe Oz Durant back in his day would have got a nomination purely for his bloody, his bulk and anchoring scrums. If you're talking about the flashier, how much of that did you get? Peter de Villiers is.
You just said the flashier and then you went mute. Oh, you go on mute again, Joey.
Sorry, yeah. So the flashier props, who for mine are the ones that could ball carry. They're not necessarily ones who avoided rucks, but you found them in the backs more often than not. Our own mate Census Johnson comes to mind there. Simon Lemel. There's a lot of props there who you're just looking at them, you don't think that they would bring much to the game, but they actually do. Like Simon Lemel, he was small in stature, but boy, could that guy make an impact. Ball in hand, he was really good. He could tackle, he could scrum. And he's actually the only guy that I've ever scrummed against or seen in a scrum that never actually bound his hands in a scrum. He would go into a scrum and have his hands like this, and then he would, with his left hand, if he was a tight head, he would play with the hooker's face, and his right hand would hook the ball back. So he had a lot of tricks, that fella. And he got away with it quite a lot. So other props like South African props, you had some really good ball playing props. Even now you've got Taniela Tupou. He's good with ball in hand. There's probably a few areas of his game that he needs to work on, but ball in hand, he's a beast, and it's probably why he's getting a lot more game time than he would have, and maybe in the 90s and the 2000s. The game has changed and it's forever changing. Seems to be suiting the more mobile prop versus the powerful prop. You don't really need to have too much power these days by the looks of it. As long as you've got a good work rate, you are good with ball in hand and don't give away too many penalties, I think you'll keep getting picked.
I think it's if you stand out in your role. So you got to look at Michael Hooper being selected, right? So Richie McCaw has been there before. So what they're good in their role. Michael Hooper, for example, just awesome ball carrier. Once he gets the ball, knows how to run certain lines. Can obviously makes a truckload of tackles each game that he's involved in. Knows how to jackal and steal the ball. So he's getting rewarded, getting nominated for his core role. When you look at a front rower, they're not getting rewarded for having a straight back, being able to destroy the opposition front row. A lot of the spectators are totally oblivious to all of that carry on. They just think it's the big boys are just having a rest in that scrum or dominant because they're a force together as an 8. But at the same time, all that pressure that's coming from both ends, from behind and from in front of you, as a front row, you're right there in the middle of it, trying to be straight and hold form in order to keep shape for the whole pack. So they don't get rewarded enough for that. It's almost like you have to be like a Taniela Tupou to have a look in, to be in general play, a good ball carrier, and just exciting to watch him see, to be able to put a little bit of a step on. That almost is a certain criteria. Or is it, like you say, brain for bronze? Is it someone that's intelligent and knows how to run a backline? So then you get a halfback or a first five in with the run to be nominated. Because then does that nullify a Yanni Duplessis, who is a doctor? He's intelligent enough to be a doctor, yet he's plying his trade in the front row. I don't know. Whatever the criteria is, a lot of the front rows don't meet it. You could argue the Beast is probably another one that, over his tenure as a stalwart for the box, should have been included a long, long time ago. Do we go back as far as Case Muse, who had, at the time when he played, he was the highest try-scoring front rower in the world, let alone for the All Blacks. So, do you go with someone that's a heavy hitter, let alone a good scrummager? Questionable on line-out throws, but a Trivaliota, does he come into play when he was playing? So the argument could go on and on, but it seems like whatever the panel has created in terms of a criteria, you've got the current mix. But I think it's for their core roles, and I guess the impact they have on games as well, which is where Michael Hooper would come in. The Toje may have had a few moments, but a lot of that we probably don't see with the lack of exposure if you're not going to wake up in the early hours of the morning to watch a test for the Six Nations or what he does in club rugby and what have you. But we only see the Michael Hoopers, what he does. We've obviously, once the media jump on the wagon, you hear about a DuPont. So you start watching and you start noticing. But is he any different to a Brad Weber? But just Brad Weber just not getting much of a chance. Yeah, that's questionable. I'm just saying, just throw it in the mix. Just throw it in the mix. If he got more game time, I believe a Brad Weber would be able to stamp his mark on the game as much as, if not more. But then questions now have raised with TJ Perenara's impact on the game as a starter. I'd choose Brad Weber over TJ. Obviously for his experience, and he's one of the most experienced halfbacks that we've got. But has his time come to an end? Will he make it through to the next World Cup? TJ Perenara.
Okay, good to hear you. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, you find a way to get your Chiefs guys some love. So interesting conversation about props turning into you love Brad Weber, okay? But no, good thoughts there. I wanted to give you guys that platform because props don't get enough love. It's sort of what this boils down to. There's so many old cliches and adages in rugby which turn out to be true. And one of the oldest is the game is won and lost up front. And if you ain't winning the front, the front rowers ain't doing their job and winning it up the front, it doesn't matter how flashy the first fives and the backs are. And I will say the first fives had the most nominations. So he can do all the tricks in the world, but he needs to do it on the back of front football. So yeah, I wanted to give you guys that moment. And I agree with you, Roger. I tried to think back on the history of who should have at least got a nomination. The guys that I thought of, the Beast was one. Carl Heyman was another guy. He probably left New Zealand rugby a little bit too early. He played some of his best footy overseas in club rugby. There's another guy that I thought of. And Martin Castro Giovanni is another guy who I thought, shucks, he was a beast. He should have got nominated, at least a nomination, just to credit him for his great work. So, got to give some loves to the front row. But yeah, as it stands now, my money's on DuPont. We'll move forward now. Our editor, our boss, our producer, Karen, the head of the WesWes Network, he brought us something which wasn't on our list of things to discuss. We were talking about the eligibility laws. They're sort of up for a revote, just to see if we want to change eligibility, change the eligibility laws. As it stands now, you can pick one country, and that's your country. It doesn't matter if you play 5 minutes like Issa Nathewa, or you play 150 tests like Alan Wynne-Jones. It's the country you pick is the country you pick, and you're stuck with it. But they're looking to review it and maybe change it to a 3-year or a 5-year stand-down period. I know it's something we've talked about regularly on the Counter Ruck Rod. So have you got any thoughts on what you would like to happen and what you think will happen in regards to the votes?
Obviously, what I'd like to happen, and it's these reviews have been happening, as far back as I can remember, from when the game went professional post '95 World Cup, and the results always the same. You're going to have the Northern Hemisphere representatives that are on these panels that make these reviews and then put out the votes. If the majority of them are for the Northern Hemisphere, and whether we get an elect from the Pacific or for Oceania, or how many people do we get to vote that represent this body of players down in the Southern Hemisphere, it's always going to be against us, because obviously you're going to look at your Northern Hemisphere teams. They don't want to be outvoted. They don't want to be losing to what they refer to as Tier 1 countries, like your Tonga, we saw what happened in the 2011 World Cup against France. Tonga beat France. So for those to regularly happen, that's what will happen if they give former Tier 1 players to be able to therefore play for a nation that they have some sort of association to in terms of ancestry. So it does open up a can of worms, but then at the same time, the catch-22 is if they do vote for it, then they're going to put a stand-down period in place. So their best rugby is going to be well past them. So if they're gone overseas and they're no longer eligible for the likes of the All Blacks or the Wallabies, then why not just let them change allegiance then and there? Or will it be a stand-down for the next World Cup, and then they'll be eligible post that? Who knows? However they want to word it or play it out, it's going to be against the whole purpose of it, because by the time that, if there is a stand-down period, by the time they're eligible, those players, those guys, if we're talking about actual players right now, it would be the likes of a Charles Piutau. How much of a stand-down has he had already? Or does it start afresh from when the new rule comes in, if it was to go that way? I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it'll happen for a long, long time yet. I'll be lucky to see it happen in my lifetime. Who knows? I don't think it will, but definitely won't happen before this next World Cup. Scotland do not want to lose to a Fiji or Samoa or Tonga.
Yeah, and I think that we have same thoughts where it's sort of those guys at the bottom of the Six Nations like Italy and all the rest of it who get votes, Scotland, who they'll get overtaken if that happens. But Joey, mate, I'll give you a word. We're just talking about the eligibility laws are up for review again for the how many hundredth time, whatever. So Rod gave his thoughts about what he hopes will happen, what he wants to happen, and what he thinks will happen, mate. So I'll get you to chime in as well with your thoughts.
Yeah, like you said, it's been an ongoing debacle, if you like. I just think, you know, if you're going to leave the rules as is or not doing anything about eligibility, flexibility, then that's fine. Just don't go out there and, you know, wax lyrical about globalization of rugby being a priority because it's absolutely shite. You know, don't ever say that. Don't say that just to get the votes when it's time for you to be voted in to the World Rugby Board. You know, you say one thing, but when you get in there, you go missing, you go quiet. So, yeah, it's frustrating, but at the same time, I get it. I totally get it. I get why these tier one nations would want to protect their status and their position in world rugby and global international rugby. I totally get why a Wales or a Scotland or an Ireland would vote against that kind of relaxation of a rule that's been there for a while now. That they have enjoyed positive outcomes from, as a bit of a flow-on effect from, having these tier two nations stay tier two and stay at a level where they're not actually competitive. And unfortunately, we'll continue to see our Pacific Island nations, for instance, stay at these levels of competition for a while yet until, I don't know, something drastic changes. I think the only real way is and I'm talking decades into the future now, only real way that Pacific Island rugby can get a level playing field in terms of, international status is if they created their own competitions and drew their own kind into these competitions where they are now competitive with the likes of a Super Rugby. And until that day, which for the foreseeable future doesn't look likely to happen unless, you all of a sudden get a whole bunch of Polynesian or Pacific Island billionaires pump a whole bunch of money into these competitions, or makeshift competitions, as Roger likes to say. Until that day, things will remain as status quo. And I absolutely agree with Roger. Yeah, it's something that can happen, but will it happen in the next 2 or 3 years? Highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
There's been too many players that have been given false hope. Ones that are no longer playing for the All Blacks or for the Wallabies, and leading into the next World Cup, and they've probably been out of contention for at least 3-4 years already. And these votes, it's almost just like they're obliged to let the world know that they're considering changing the rules, but it's just all hearsay and there's no change in the result. So it's just like saying, yeah, we are trying to make this whole thing global, spread the rugby gospel, yet they're trying to restrict it and limit it as much as they possible for their own endeavours, and that's what I believe we're seeing. And for as long as Italy can still remain in a Six Nations competition when they've had such a bad win-loss ratio and yet still be in the top Six Nations in the Northern Hemisphere, what does that say? There's a lot of money coming from the Italians, and obviously that's what helps keep it afloat. So, and from what I remember, they've got a couple more votes than most countries do, let alone the whole of the Pacific. How does that work? How does that add up when Italy are not really a world force and yet are able to still maintain in one of the most prestigious international competitions?
Yep, it looks like we're all on the same page, so it looks like more lip service. I'll hopefully, hold out some hope, but I'm with you, Joey. I think, they talk about globalization and all these other things. They say the right things, but when it comes time to act, they put the cross on the vote and say, no, we're not changing that. So I'm hopeful that things will change. I don't know if it will, but maybe it's the cynical side of me that thinks that, it's going to be more of the status quo. But when you talk about the globalization and you think, the World Cup's the pinnacle of our sport, and we've got guys like you mentioned, Charles Piatel and Stephen Nortour, some of the best rugby players in the world, watching on the TV at home. You got to have the best players playing at the competitions that everyone's watching. The Rugby World Cup, I believe, is the third most watched sporting event in the world. So the Olympics is first, then the football, soccer World Cup, and then us, the Rugby World Cup. So you've got to have the best players on show, and that means tweaking the rules a little bit. We don't want to have a free-for-all where people are chopping and changing every year, but just a bit of, I'm comfortable with a 3-year or a 5-year stand down on whatever they agree to. I think that could work. So I still hold out hope, but I'm with you. I think it's not going to happen. Joey, you brought up a point here which we're just going to talk about now. Rassie Erasmus. So he's been banned. He's been a bit of a naughty boy. I'm not 100% on the story, but I know it's been topical in the rugby world of recent days. So I'll let you take the first word, mate. Tell us what happened there with Rassie Erasmus from South Africa, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, old Rassie, he got himself into a bit of hot water. So following the first test between the British and Irish Lions and also South Africa.
Yep.
Rassie Erasmus had a lot to say about the match official, who was Nick Berry from Australia. Not only did he have a lot to say, he had a whole video where he analysed Nick Berry's performance and pointed out 38 discrepancies in his eyes, where he critiqued what's her name, Nick Berry, in a not so nice way. A lot of vulgar language. And it was a video that he did and posted on social media, which was about over an hour long, and had to be taken straight into consideration. And effective immediately, he was given a 2-month ban from all rugby, and also he's been banned from any matches as an official, attending matches at stadiums, and even being on the sideline of matches until September of 2022. So obviously he's the kind of guy who would appeal that, and him and his officials have already mentioned that they are going to appeal that. And yeah, it's quite a weird time. It's a weird thing. You don't ever hear of coaches going that far. I've heard of coaches having that kind of frustration, but a 60-plus minute video pointing out 38 flaws in a referee's officiating. And unfortunately for Rassie, the match official, Nick Berry, put forward his case, and it was accepted pretty much immediately. his case was quite strong, and it was accepted by a panel of consisting of New Zealand's very own Mike Meeker, who was a judge from the Otago teams of the 90s, and also more as well. But it's unfortunate that you've got a situation here where a top rugby man and admin person from South Africa, director of rugby, Rassie Erasmus, has gone in on one individual and targeted him, and pretty much, Nick Berry said, look, doesn't matter what sanctions you put on this guy, what punishment he gets, my name is tarnished forever. And my family have been brought into, some really ill feelings because of what this man has done. And unfortunately for Nick Berry, his family has been targeted as well, unnecessarily. And refs do get it wrong. Refs always, have moments in their career where they could have done things better. Even someone like Mr. Owen there, Nigel Owen, he's admitted to things in his past where he's got it totally wrong, and he's put his hands up and gone, yeah, I got it wrong. But unfortunately, as fans, we expect more, we expect the best, we expect perfection from our referees, and unfortunately, when you leave things up to humans, there's a thing called human error, and that can happen from time to time, more often than we would like. So Rassie Erasmus, unfortunately, 2-month ban, effective immediately from all rugby, and banned from attending any matches in any capacity until September 2022. Naughty boy. Slap on the hand.
Yeah, when you say it like that, a 60-minute video, pointing out 38 issues, that's going beyond human error. He thinks that he's questioning the integrity of the referees and the games, and basically always calling it rigged. So once you get down to that level, that's where you've got to be hauled over the coals for that. That's pretty serious stuff. So
but is it because of his stature? If it was just any Joe Blogs that made similar sort of analysis, would they be hauled over the coals as Rassie Erasmus has been? Or, is it freedom of speech? Do we delve into that? Is it going to someone allowing to have an opinion? Coming onto a podcast, someone having an opinion, will they be judged in the same way? Or is it because Rassie Erasmus is who he is? If a guy like John Hart was to come out in a similar nature?
I think the problem there, Rogers, these people in these positions are contracted not to go at officials. So and you see it time and time again in the NRL competitions where you can watch the coaches after a game and they really want to say something about the refs, but they're holding themselves back unless their name's Terry Lamb or someone like that.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we don't allow the coaches to just have a proper go in the after-match interview, which would be very entertaining for the likes of us.
So I guess Rassie probably knew what was going to happen post his analysis. He knew what was going to come. He knew the repercussions of it, but he just wanted to do it.
Apparently he's appealing it.
Yeah.
But I suppose you can question, did it work? Because what he was trying to do, I'm assuming, is trying to influence the refereeing for the next game. So, if you keep saying you got this hard calls and all the rest of it, then, human nature, you talk about human nature there and human error, the next referee that comes in, that's going to be in the back of his mind that, we got these hard calls. So when it comes to the 50-50, sometimes
probably
you're sort of that biasness where I don't want to get called out, so I'll just sort of give a couple of 50-50s towards South Africa.
But he's probably
That's sort of
caused
why
a
you
lot
can't
of
question
people not to
integrity.
be referees.
Yeah, slippery slope. But I'm glad. I'm just glad he got heavily sanctioned because I don't like you. I suppose you could question a call, one call here, one call there. I wouldn't be so upset about because there's always a bad call. There's always if there is a bad call and you call it out, I think that's okay. But if you've 38 bad calls in 60-minute video, that's too much.
And
That's
was that
getting
all
to
based
his
on one
integrity.
game? Was that based on one game that he was watching, or 38 different calls and different?
I think it was one game. I think I heard that he tried to use like a burner account as well, where he tried to put some stuff on a fake Twitter page that he created as well. So he's really going down a really bad path. So he deserves to be whatever came his way. I'm glad because you can't get to a point where people start questioning the integrity of the game. Yeah. So Rassie, mate, I don't know what you're up to, but boys, we're going to move on. We've got our TAB account, so we'll have to check. I didn't get how much we got on in there at the moment, but we've been putting $10 on, and we're going to stick with it. So we've got there's quite a smorgasbord of rugby going on. So France is playing New Zealand, both the men's and the women's game, and New Zealand is struggling on both sides, so it's going to be must-win games for New Zealand on that front. England, South Africa is another good game to watch. I'll give a shout out to our Pacific brothers, so Georgia and Fiji, and Romania and Tonga. Wales is playing Australia. Ireland's playing Argentina. Also got the NPC Finals as well. So quite a lot of rugby. So I'll get a tip from each of you to put on our multi. And I'll give you guys some time to think. So I'll give you my tip first. I don't know if the French team and the All Blacks teams have been named yet. I'll have to check. But I picked Antoine Dupont to win Player of the Year. And I think he's going to have a good game. So I'm going to pick Antoine Dupont to score a try against the All Blacks. Just any time try scorer. That's what I'm going to put on for one of our multi. But
that's a big call.
Joey, have you got one? You got one for us to check on the multi? We've been quite successful so far, so we're playing with house money as it stands at the moment. I guess I'll say that.
I don't know if there will be much of a return, but I will guarantee I'll even chuck some of my own money at it in my own bet. A try by Will Jordan.
Yeah. That's almost a guarantee. I think, Roger, what was your stat about his try-scoring abilities? He's up there, eh?
Who's that?
Will Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
I think
17 out of 12 tests is a massive strike rate.
Yeah, Roger, we'll come to you, mate. Have you got a tip for us, brother, for the week?
Waikato to beat Tasman in the final.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the makeshift NPC. Nice. No Auckland. You don't beat Auckland.
It's different.
South
Africa opted out of the even though it was COVID that came in later, but South Africa weren't going to be there anyway. Whereas Auckland counties in North Harbour, just due to lockdown, they had no choice. So it wasn't really a makeshift. It's what they had to carry on with.
I will say that our TAB count's looking pretty good. We're still in the positives, quite a lot in the positives. So I've got a good feeling about this multi. I'll put our $10 on as usual, and we'll see how we go for our next podcast. We're just about to close up, boys. So get some final thoughts, just on anything in the world of rugby, or just anything you want to say in general. So, Rog, mate, I'll give you a word. Anything you wanted to say just in closing up our podcast for the week?
All the best to the Black Ferns. Hopefully, it might be another hard lesson learned this weekend, but I think there's no doubt there's good spirit within the team. Portia Woodman, hopefully she can carry on her good form, just needs to have a bit more ball. And then the other wing is massive impact as well for the Black Ferns. She's good on attack and good on defence. She reminds me of the young Vainga Tungamala, Inga the winger, thunder thighs down the sideline, but her name eludes me at the moment.
Aisha something.
Yes, Aisha. Yeah, she's very good winger for the 15s game. So, yeah, wished him all the best. And Will Jordan did get a nomination. I was just looking. He's nominated as Breakout Player of the Year.
Awesome.
And so he's up there with the likes of Australian. What's the Australian? Callaway?
Andrew Callaway.
Yeah, Callaway, Marcus
Marcus
Smith,
Smith.
and Louis Rees-Zammit from Wales. So they're a breakthrough player of the year. And then you've got your men's sevens player of the year, Napoleoni Bolata from Fiji, Marcos Moneta, Argentina, another Fijian, and Giuta Vainikolo, I think. And then our very own Scott Curry. I don't know how they've made those nominations with the lack of sevens over the last year, but there we go.
Yeah. Nice thoughts there. How about you, Joey, mate? Any final words in closing up?
Yeah, I also want to give a shout out to the Black Ferns and some words of encouragement. Stick in there, stay together. You guys have got the goods. Just do what you need to do to turn things around, turn your fortunes around. I think you've got a good squad there. I also want to agree with Roger on the Waikato prediction. And reason being is because I've become more of a fan now that they beat Canterbury the way they did. They showed some grit and determination to get the job done against obviously a class side. And Tasman, although they are the defending champs, I just think it'll be harder for them to win at Waikato Stadium against a team who does well when all their fans show up. And obviously, I would bet money to say the fans are definitely going to show up. And I've always said all along, even in my teenage years, Waikato have always had the best fans for provincial rugby. And I stand by that. So that'll definitely help get that 16th man kind of thing. Also, I think Taranaki will win the championship. Just home field advantage against Otago. And yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Yep, nice there. I just want to say thanks to you boys, Roger, Joey. You've been our consistent guys on the Counter Ruck, so thanks for jumping on again, just sharing your rugby knowledge, boys. I just want to say thanks to the listeners again for joining us for another episode.
Look at the message
Counter
with
Ruck.
this
Or do you want me to go
Roger's
lower?
jumping the fence again for another team over to France. But I just also wanted to mention that we were a finalist, the Counter Ruck. We were a finalist for the New Zealand Podcast Awards in the sports section. Now, the awards took place, I think it was last week, I believe. And unfortunately, we didn't win anything. But just want to say I appreciate all the support from the listeners and all the people that took the time to nominate and vote for us. I know Joey he had a double nomination. Your other podcast, The Pitch, was also a finalist for another award. So you've been carving it up there. But yeah, Joey, did you want to say anything about those awards? Because you had double nomination before we finish up.
I just want to say, look, I'm grateful, and it's good to be a part of the WesWes Network, and we've got a great thing going on here where we're putting out content through the eyes of Polynesians, and it speaks to to us. So I think I just want to encourage us here at the Counter Ruck and all the other podcasts as a part of the WesWes Network to keep going, keep putting content out there. You never know where it could lead to, but also it's much needed by our people to hear that kind of stuff, and obviously everyone else.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep, thanks for that there, Joey. 100% agree with that. So, yeah, we're providing that Polynesian perspective, and it's just grateful to get a nomination and be recognised for the hard work that you guys have all put in for the Counter Ruck there. So, yeah, and just our listeners who nominated us, for us to get a final nomination for the award, we're really humbled for that. So, yeah, we're just trying to kind of carry on with what we're doing and just say, hey, the Counter Ruck, it's available on the usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher. There's heaps more. Whatever you listen to on your podcast, YouTube as well, if you would like watching your podcast. So yeah, keep supporting us and don't forget to click subscribe. So yeah, boys, thanks for jumping on the pod again, as I mentioned. Rog, Joey, we've got Cam's doing a lot of the work in the background for us as well. So thanks, boys. We'll be back again hopefully soon. Cheers.
Allez les Bleus.
Oh,
Cheers,
edit that
boys.
out.